Welcome to this Al Monitor Zoom event on the next steps in UAE Israel normalization. I'm Andrew Parasiliti, president of Al Monitor, and I'm hosting this event with my colleague, the must-read Israeli columnist and author of The Netanyahu Years, Ben Caspit. We have two fantastic guests with us today to talk about UAE Israel normalization. They are both friends and both highly regarded diplomats. Omar Saif Ghobash is the UAE Assistant Minister for Culture and Public Diplomacy. He was also the UAE's ambassador to France and Russia. He is the author of the award-winning book, Letters to a Young Muslim, which I would recommend to all of our viewers and listeners. He is on the acquisition committee of the Louvre, Abu Dhabi. He is on
not anymore, I'm afraid.
Not anymore, okay, well, it's still a nice thing to mention. The advisory board of the International Center for the Study of Radicalization at King's College, board of trustees, member of the board of trustees of the Emirates Diplomatic Academy in Abu Dhabi. Alon Ushpiz is Director General of Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He previously served as Israel's ambassador to both India and as non-resident ambassador to Sri Lanka. He was political director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a policy advisor to the foreign minister, political secretary at the Israel Embassy in Tokyo, and Minister for Congressional Affairs, Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C. That's where Alon and I first met. I won't say how many years ago, when I worked for then Senator Chuck Hagel as his foreign policy advisor. Alon looks exactly the same. So this is, he was a star then, star now. Excellencies, Omar and Alon, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. It's great to have you. I will now turn to Ben Caspit for the first question.
Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm pretty sure that if someone had suggested this broadcast to me or to anybody else some 2 or 3 years ago, they would have thought they were dreaming, but dreams sometimes come true. And I want to start with you, Ambassador Ghobash. I'd like to ask you how you're surviving the invasion of the Israeli tourists. As you may have heard, we have a reputation of being quite colorful, not exactly quiet. These days, the Emirates is full of Israeli tourists, businessmen, journalists, and many others busy with conferences and meetings with the locals. What is your initial impression of these historic encounters between our people, and do you need any help with this?
You make very good points. I don't want to say that we're overwhelmed with Israelis, but we're very, very happy to have them there. It's coincided with a number of events. Kind of the opening up of Dubai in particular to foreign visitors. The system is much more accommodating. The number of flights, of course, I think, what is it? It's come up to 28 flights a week.
Yeah.
That's another thing. And then, of course, your own restrictions within Israel on Orthodox weddings. I think we've really benefited from that. And the number of videos going around Dubai and Abu Dhabi of Orthodox singing and Orthodox dances is really quite amazing. So we welcome any restrictions you put on movement, so we can benefit from Israeli presence in the Emirates.
Yes, Andrew. Andrew?
Yes, I should mention, and I mentioned in the beginning that this event is live. We're on the record, and that our listeners and viewers can participate via Zoom app. That is, they can submit a question, or by sending an email to events@almonitor.com. So, gentlemen, this one's for both of you. The Trump administration has facilitated these historic normalization agreements. The U.S. will soon have a new administration under Joe Biden, who is senator and vice president, has long engagements and deep relationships in the region. Biden has said he wants to resume negotiations on an Iran nuclear deal, assuming Iran's in compliance, and he wants to make that deal stronger. And he said to Tom Friedman last week, he wants to do so in coordination with the U.S. partners and allies in the region, which we assume means Israel and the United Arab Emirates. What would you both advise, and what are your concerns in a new approach to Iran regarding its nuclear program and other issues in the region? And Alon, maybe we should start with you.
Thank you, Andrew. And Omar, once again, it's good to see you. Even if it is on a screen, we will be very happy to see you once again in Tel Aviv and in Israel. And good day, Ben. Very glad to see you too. I would say the following. Look, I don't think Israelis should be in a position to advise. I think Israelis should be in a position to represent our policies. And I would start with what should be defined of all of us as a goal. A, indefinitely blocking all paths of the Iranians to a bomb. You can phrase this in different ways, but I think this one is very much suitable. And the second thing is to disrupt and diminish all regional malign activities. I can give many examples, but this includes terrorism, incitement, and I would add in between also missiles, which is in between the two words of nuclear and the regional malign activities. Point B, I think it's tremendously important to recognize reality. And I think recognizing reality begins with 2021 is not 2015. I think that's obvious to every reasonable human being, and I don't think there will be any daylight between us and any partner of us on this issue. The third thing that I would very much emphasize is that we have to recognize that the Iranian threat is a multifaceted one. This is not only about nuclear, and it's not only about regional, and it's not only about missiles, and it's not only about suppression of human rights. This is something that we have to view or look at as a holistic. Fourth, I would say that the minute we agree on the term indefinite, it cannot go hand in hand with the term of sunsets. There is an inter-built contradiction in this. Fifth, I would say, and I've participated in the course of the years in many discussions, and in some cases heated debates about this. I very much believe in the term that was invented a couple of years ago about biting sanctions. Pressure does work, and pressure has to be aimed at achieving goals. And you can, one can outline a couple of goals when it comes to putting pressure on Iran. But I would say two things. There is not one indicator that I've looked at the last 2 years that doesn't show that the Iranian economy is almost on a free fall situation. And the second thing, which I think is very much ignored, the less money, the more dire straits they are in when it comes to their economy, the less resources the Iranians have to kill Israelis, moderate Arabs, and to topple regimes, and to kill innocent people in the region. Last but not least, and I think you've referred to it, Andrew, there is a very good reason to have very detailed conversations with US partners in the region. This is not only about Israel or the UAE. This is about a lot of other partners that you have in the Gulf, but not only in the Gulf, in other parts of the Middle East. And last thing I want to say is that one can look at the Abraham Accords from many perspectives, from many angles. One of the angles, which I think is a must, is how do you look at these peace agreements as a tool to bring about security and prosperity in the region, including vis-a-vis the Iranian threat. Thank you.
Omar, how does this issue affect the UAE, who are looking at new administration, you're even closer to Iran. You have your issues there as well. But the UAE has also shown an interest in engagement over the last year during COVID. They used the humanitarian concerns, the shared humanitarian concerns in reaching out to Iran over the past year. How's it looking from Abu Dhabi? And when you look at the Iranian threat and challenge to the UAE with the new administration coming in and the possibility of a new round of nuclear negotiations?
I don't think that the new administration means that we've changed our position in any way. We have a good relationship with the Democrats and the Republicans in the US. We've got our relationship is with the United States, not with any particular individual group or party. And I think we've made our position very clear over the years. And one of the key issues is inclusion of the Gulf states as interested parties in the issue of Iran's behavior in the Middle East and its nuclear program. It's really important also to recognize that we are one of the closest, geographically closest countries to Iran. We also trade with Iran, and we've had, sort of historical relations of commerce and trade over centuries. We want to live in peace with Iran and with the Iranian people. There is an issue, of course, with the Iranian behavior in the region, apart from the nuclear issue, this corrosive influence that they are using to undermine state structures across the region. And I think, that you can talk about Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. This destabilization of state systems has a very, very worrying effect potentially for other countries in the area. And it needs to be understood by the Iranian side that we're not really going to get very far if they continue pursuing these programs. And it's almost as though the current regime in Iran is structured to undermine and to thwart. And there's no way in which we can have a peaceful relationship if that's the basis upon which they act. So we would hope that there's time, that they understand it's time for a change in approach. And again, to understand that we actually want to live in peace. Our concern as the Emirates is really to focus on economic development and taking our people forward. Ideally, we'd like to do that with the rest of the region participating as well.
Ben? Ben, you're on mute.
I want to follow up on Andrew's question with a different angle. The same expectation of all the region to the new administration, what do you think? The biggest question is whether you think the momentum of the past 6 months as reflected in the agreements between Israel and 3 Muslim states will endure after January 20th. Do you think the Biden administration will adapt the policy of the Trump administration and be willing to invest American energies and assets in leveraging and advancing this process? And how important is it to bring also the Saudis on board, Alon?
Well, let me start by saying that President-elect Biden is a bastion of support, an old friend of Israel. The Prime Minister had a conversation with him, I believe, some like 10 days or 2 weeks ago, and I understand it was a very good conversation. Secondly, I think that American interests in the region haven't changed. The US is interested in a prosperous, stable Middle East, and I don't have the slightest doubt. Also, based on the President-elect conversation with the Prime Minister, that the US commitment to Israel, to its security, to its prosperity, is ironclad as ever. I have to say that the energy, efforts, dedication that the Trump administration has shown when it comes to the ongoing effort of the Abraham Accords, including expanding the cycle of the members in this club, is not less, in my mind, not less than breathtaking. But I'm 100% sure that this commitment will continue also and will continue also during the Biden administration. I believe, although I'm not obviously not representing American interests, I believe it's good for the US. I'm 100% sure it's good for us, for the Emirates, for Bahrain, for the Sudanese. I'm also 100% sure it's very good for the region. I want to say something that I've felt for the last couple of months. This thing is a strategic needle mover in our region. It's not less important than previous peace agreements, strategic ones, the peace with Egypt and the peace with Jordan. And I think it's very much unique in nature. I think your opening question, Ben, has in it the core of all the good things that are different about this. I have to tell you something that I've been dealing with in the last 48 hours. I've been dealing, and my staff have been dealing with facilitating the landing of Israeli planes and Fly Dubai, carrying Israeli tourists in the Emirates. Right now, as we speak, there are 35,000 Israelis registered to fly to the Emirates in December. At the peak, and I don't think that's the end of it, I think we'll easily reach in December 50,000. At the peak of flights, we are going to have 50 flights going on between Israel and the Emirates. But there is one piece of paper that I have to tell you that I've been thinking about in the last 48 hours, which gives me the thrill. And that is that the Emiratis have approached us with a request to sign a driving license MOU. And the essence of the driving license MOU is going to be that after, Ben, if you relocate to Dubai, you can drive with your Israeli license for 1 year. If you decide to stay there, to extend your relocation to the second year, all you have to do is take your Israeli driving license and go to the Ministry of Transportation of the Emirates, and they will immediately give you an Emirati driving license. The implication of this is that if you are not an Israeli journalist, but an Israeli businessman, and you go and open an office in Dubai, the UAE is welcoming you to stay and to live in the most normal way possible. These things, I think, are the building blocks of the strategic thing that we are working on. So I strongly believe in what we're doing here, and I think it wouldn't have been possible without this administration commitment and efforts, and I don't have the slightest doubt that this will continue to the next administration.
Ambassador Ghobash, first of all, try not to be in the UAE during December. With the 35,000 Israelis. What do you think about the chances that this momentum will go on in the Biden administration?
Well, firstly, I agree with many of the points that Alon has come up with. I do think, or rather, we do think that it is good for the United States, and we expect them to see that it was good for them. I also think that the relationship between the UAE and Israel is now independent of any other party. It was a sovereign decision of the UAE, a sovereign decision of Israel. It was achieved under the umbrella and with the guidance of the United States. Today, it's a relationship that has now taken off. We decide the pace at which it moves, and as you can see, it's moving extremely fast. It's up to us, both the Israelis and the United Arab Emirates, to demonstrate to the region and to the world the benefits of peace. We've often heard from the Israeli sides that there are tremendous benefits to peace, and we haven't necessarily seen an actualization of that in other peace treaties that the Israelis have signed. We feel that this is a different kind of peace, and it might actually show a new generation of Arabs and Muslims in the region that there can be tremendous wins economically, intellectually, culturally, and socially, I think are the real focus areas that we're going to be looking at. So, we hope that the United States will be there to support and to push. But, if they aren't, we ourselves will be pushing because we believe in peace between the Israelis and the region as a whole.
Ambassador Ghobash, one of the conditions of the UAE's decision to normalize relations with Israel was Israel's deferring annexation of Jewish settlements in the West Bank. Should we assume this remains a condition for the UAE to proceed with the pace of normalization? And I'd also ask Alon, is this off the table for the foreseeable future? That is, previous discussion of annexation of certain settlements.
I think we created an opening, and it's up to the Palestinians to take advantage of that opening. It seems that they are moving now towards more greater cooperation again with Israeli authorities, and they are interested in opening up discussion. So it seems to have been a knee-jerk reaction of anti-Emirati sentiment from the Palestinians. Perhaps now they will see the opportunity has opened up. Conditions can be placed, but time doesn't stop still. And we would encourage our Palestinian brethren to grab the opportunity while it lasts.
Well, I would say that my minister, Foreign Minister Ashkenazi, was very, very clear in all his meetings, including his appearances in Berlin with the 27 foreign ministers of the EU, that Israel's focus right now is normalization. And I have to say that what Omar has said about materializing the fruits of peace is taking a lot of our time. By the way, I've done a stock taking of agreements yesterday for my minister. And we are already have signed together between the UAE and Bahrain. We've already signed almost something like 15, 16 agreements, which is in the course of about 2 months. Just in relative terms, it took us 2 years to sign all agreements with the Kingdom of Jordan. So this is it's a pace which is unprecedented in the annals of international law, at least from the Israeli perspective. I would say I would add to the issue of the Palestinians. I think what the Abraham Accords have done, and what the courageous leadership of the UAE and Bahrain have achieved, is adding, maybe for the first time, in practical terms, because the idea was there before, but for the first time in practical terms, there is a regional flavor to this. And secondly, there is a very tangible, deliverables-oriented flavor to this. And I think that this flavor, I have a strong feeling that it speaks directly to the hearts of the people on the streets of Ramallah. I think what these people are interested in right now is health, and economy, and I think it would be a very good day for the Middle East if they will seize this opportunity and join what we are trying to do together. I'm very much encouraged by the fact that the Palestinian Authority has resumed security and civilian cooperation and have decided to take the tax revenues slightly more than 3 billion shekels to their budget. I think it's important that people in Ramallah and in Nablus and in Jenin will be able to conduct normal daily life. And this money and the civilian and security cooperation that we're having is part of their daily life.
Before my previous question, I tried to touch the very delicate Saudi issue, and I think you ignored me elegantly. so I will insist and ask a very delicate question. What do you think is going on between Israel and the Saudis? First, there was talk of immediate normalization and some amazing statements by Prince Bandar bin Sultan. Then came a dramatic U-turn with harsh attacks by Prince Turki Al Faisal against Israel's policies, a denial of the reported meeting between Netanyahu and MBS, and a flat-out declaration that there would not be any normalization unless progress is made with the Palestinians. How important is it, in your opinion, for Saudi Arabia to join this grand move in the region, and how vital is the role of the US administration in this context? Ambassador Ghobash and then Alon.
Well, I thank you very much for that question. I think I can be very brief. We in the Emirates can only demonstrate the benefits of peace. And we can't instruct anybody. We can't give any these issues. These are very, very sensitive internal matters for states like Saudi Arabia. So, you know, we can only demonstrate.
Alon?
Well, I don't believe I've ever spoken on behalf of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which is a first. But look, let me start by saying that there is a whole discussion about the fourth country who's going to join the club of the Abraham Accords, and my strong belief is that the less we speak about this, the more probable it will become. Secondly, I don't have the slightest doubt that these decisions are decisions of sovereign, courageous leaders and countries. By the way, I have the utmost admiration for my colleagues in the Emirates and in Bahrain. These people are serious, effective, professional, and very much patriotic. And I have to tell you that in the 30 years of my career as a diplomat, with one exception, obviously, which is the Hill, which is the Garden of Eden from our point of view. They are the most serious partners that I've ever had. But all of this, I'm not sure or let's put it this way. I don't think one can or should underestimate the American role in these things. American leadership, presence, involvement in the Middle East is an indispensable strategic asset for my country, and I believe also for our partners in the region.
Sure.
Now, I have a feeling that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia looks at it with a lot of interest, but with a positive flavor. And I think I know, I think I felt it on with my own experience. I flew to Bahrain over Saudi land twice. I flew to Abu Dhabi over Saudi land. And there is no way that this could have happened unless the Saudis would have permitted it. And I think there are also a couple of things when we look at the region that I imagine, I cannot speak on their behalf, I imagine that when we see these things, we see the same thing. Obviously, Saudis joining this thing is going to be a very important and positive development, but this is up to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
It's in the West Bank. Let me just remind our viewers that you can submit questions to us at events@al-monitor.com and via the Zoom app. We're getting a number of questions. Some of these we're covering in the ones Ben and I are asking, and we appreciate the engagement. Fantastic audience here today. Let me shift to another kind of in the news topic. Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer said this week that Israel is, quote, very comfortable with the U.S. sale of F-35s to the UAE. There was some initial concerns about this in Israel, but Alon, is it fair to say that this matter is a done deal from Israel's perspective, in the sense that Israel is fine and that this is now an issue solely between the U.S. and the United Arab Emirates?
Before Alon, I want to emphasize, Alon, because your new boss, the new foreign minister in Israel, Ghobash, is a general. He was the chief of staff of the IDF, and his colleague in the leadership of Blue and White was a general and chief of staff as well. Do they sleep well at night with Ambassador Dermer's remarks that he sleeps well at night with this deal? Is it, like Andrew asked, a done deal?
Let me start by saying that my foreign minister is not new anymore. He has been for many long months and has changed the ministry, what we do and how we do it. And I think we are in a better place because of the process that we're going through on different issues, including resources. Look, a couple of weeks ago, there was a very clear statement coming out from the defense minister and the prime minister, speaking about the Israeli very strong feeling of being able to count on US bipartisan long commitment to Israel's QME. This statement, I think, speaks for itself. I think it reflects the way we view our security and the way we view our relations with the US as the bedrock, or one of the bedrocks of this security.
I want to ask a geostrategic, what we say, a big question, Ambassador Ghobash and Alon. How do you see the new balance of power that's shaping up in the Middle East? Syria is being rebuilt, but at the same time is being torn between Iran and Russia. Turkey's President Erdogan is putting out feelers, maybe examining reconciliation with Israel. By the way, just now, our Al-Monitor's Amberin Zaman from Turkey scooped us with an interesting piece of news that President Erdogan is nominating an ambassador, Alon. I don't know if you're aware of it. Ufuk Ulutas is a very professional Turkish, very close to the president. It means that the Turks maybe wants to reset the situation with Israel. And also, you know, things are happening in Iraq. Lebanon is at the crossroads and is conducting negotiations with Israel about mapping maritime boundaries and gas fields. Are we really entering a new era in the Middle East? And how can the next American administration leverage these new opportunities? Ambassador Ghobash first, please.
Ben, you ask very, very difficult questions. I'm so pleased that I'm responsible for cultural affairs and not geopolitical affairs. I'm very lucky. There's so much going on in the region. There's so much volatility, and there's so much volatility coming from particular players and individuals in the region. We are making a major focus of our government efforts to stabilize our own economy and develop our own economy. Now, what happens geopolitically around the region is extremely important, but it is actually secondary. The security of our state, the security of our borders, security of our economy, and of our investments is actually kind of the number one priority. All of the geopolitical action that's going on is not within our control, and so you know, we try to manage ourselves as best as possible. But we are a small country with limited resources. So, Alon, over to you.
Well, I believe that we're also a pretty small country with limited resources. So that's another thing we have in common. Look, I would say the following. First of all, it's very clear to me that the two main challenges of 2021 in the Middle East are going to still be economy and COVID-19, and obviously the linkage between them. This is something that we have to overcome. I very much hope that the second half of 21 vaccines will kick in, and I think there's also going to be an element of what we call vaccine solidarity. At the end of the day, we will have to take care of all of us as a community or as a regional community, and it might also give us some new opportunities to cultivate and upgrade cooperation. But if I take one step back and I look at what I think is going to be the most important trend in 2021 for us, I would say that this is going to be regional coalitions and configurations. And how do we shape them? And how do we utilize them in order to overcome the challenges, including economy and COVID-19, but not only. I think it's going to touch also on technology, energy. I think is going to be very prominent on the list. And one can obviously not ignore security and stability. And this new vehicle incorporating the Abraham Accords, obviously the peace agreements between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain, is going to become, I think, a major vehicle for all of us to make things better. Not only because we focus on deliverables, not only because we focus on economy and technology. You know, the first cooperation that we had between Emirati private sector and Israeli private sector was in health, in the fight against COVID-19. I think it says something, as Omar said. These things that we do together show the people of the region that things can be different, and through these things we can alleviate the suffering of people. But I don't have the slightest doubt that this will go beyond this and will touch also on issues of security.
Can you comment, Alon, about the Turkey matter? Do you recognize, see, or feel any attempt of President Erdogan to restart something with Israel, send an ambassador, a new page, maybe preparing himself for the new administration?
Well, the first rule that you learn in diplomacy is never comment on a piece of news that someone brings into the conversation, the live on record conversation, without any preparation. And actually, this lesson goes very much hand in hand with our acquaintance for more than 20 years. So I'll be double careful on this. Look, on the Turkish issue, I would say that countries have to become sources of as I said, stability and prosperity. There are things that are happening in the context of Turkey actions that do not run in the direction of what I've just said. There are activities in Eastern Mediterranean that are a source of concern for us, that are a source of concern for our partners in the region, including member states of the European Union. I would remind all of us that there is an active Hamas office in Istanbul. That's a very serious source of concern for my country. And I can outline some other issues related to this. I think all of us bear a responsibility, and all of us have to implement this responsibility in the most effective and proficient way.
We've had a number of questions on the cultural aspects of normalization. And Ambassador Omar, I want to ask it to you this way. I mentioned in our opening remarks in the introduction your work, Letters to a Young Muslim, which is really a fantastic piece for those of us who follow the region and try and understand the demographic bulge of youth and folks and how they're dealing with religion as identity in the Middle East. It's really a must read.
Thank you.
You wrote it 3 years ago. How would you begin the chapter if you were to update it on normalization in terms of how you were addressing, you write it to your son, but I think it's a general applied to the younger generation in terms of how you believe normalization is already and will continue to affect cultural attitudes between Israelis and Arabs, Muslims and Jews, Muslims and non-Muslims.
When I published the book, some people did ask me why I hadn't tackled the issues, the political issues between the Arabs and the Israelis. And, well, I didn't really have an answer to that, but there was one unpublished chapter, and that was on anti-Semitism. And it was something that I had grown up with. It's just something that we absorbed, but we also struggled with. It was the idea that you could hate a people, men, women, and children without, distinction and without ascription of personal responsibility. And that is actually a problematic position to take for any young person. I wrote a chapter on it, and it didn't get into the final version of the book, seen as perhaps a little too sensitive and provocative. What I will say is that I believed that the anti-Semitism in the region was much deeper and much more profound than it turns out that it is. And one of the things that many of my colleagues and I have noticed is that with the signing of peace, with the positioning of our leadership, that this is something that is of political importance, but it is also a moral position in accordance with our self-declared tolerance. It's remarkable how quickly that anti-Semitism just sort of fell apart. And for me personally, it's very interesting to see and very reassuring that bad ideas can be undermined by bold political moves. And in a way, signing a peace treaty with Israel and reaching out in the way the Emirates has called the bluff of all of those, paranoid positions that certain individuals have taken over the years. So I think that's one of the key things that I would sort of put out there, that spot a bad idea, think through it, and then make a bold move to undermine it. And that's the way in which we're going to hopefully change the state of the Arab world, where unfortunately there are many, many bad ideas that are still dominant in certain parts. I hope that's not too vague.
I have to say that when I first visited the UAE, I think a few weeks ago, we've just toured the market, the gold market, and other markets in Dubai. A bunch of noisy Israeli journalists, and suddenly one of us said, "Listen, we are in an Arab country, and we are not hiding. We're talking aloud. Our David signs are outside. What is happening here?" Alon, can you comment about what just the ambassador said about? He told us before that he thought that the anti-Semitism is a lot deeper, and suddenly the Abraham Accords were signed and it almost disappeared. So what happened here?
No, I'm not sure that I can give you an eloquent answer about what happened. I can certainly share with you my experiences and feelings in the last 3 or 4 months since the beginning or since the birth of the Abraham Accords. I think diplomats and Israeli citizens find our Emirati and Bahraini friends and partners as very friendly and warm and practical people that want to do things together. The things that we're trying to achieve together in the course of our interactions are not less than mind-boggling. Let me give you one example. We had a very complicated set of negotiations when it comes with the Emirates, when it comes to visa regime. And the outcome of these negotiations is that very shortly, I believe in a couple of weeks' time, Israelis and Emiratis will be able to visit each other without visas. Now, if I want to visit Andrew now, or if let's say my sister wants to visit Andrew now in DC, she will need a visa. But she can go and visit Omar's family without any visa. And so have done 35,000 Israeli tourists. There is something very different. I think it's also reflected, and I think we've discussed this, Ben, in the past. It's very much reflected in the way new media treats the whole thing. Since the birth of the Abraham Accords, we the Israeli Foreign Ministry, I would say, had the exposure to 240 million people in the Middle East. In September, we had 140,000 new followers to our accounts, ministry accounts, Facebook. By the way, it seems, based on our polls in the last couple of months, that we are the most popular in Iraq. The wave of support coming out of Iraqi followers to what we're doing, Omar, is the highest in the region. So there are things that are happening here that I'm not sure that I'm able to explain, but I'm 100% sure that they are very good and positive, and we have to build on them and to strengthen them.
We have a number of questions returning to the Palestinian issue. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said in his UN General Assembly address that he'd like to see a regional peace conference next year. There seemed to be some support in the last few months at the UN for this, and US UN Ambassador Kelly Craft didn't reject the idea. Let me ask both of you, does the normalization process, in your view, set the stage for a major diplomatic push in 2021 to address the Palestinian issue? And maybe we start with Ambassador Ghobash.
We're certainly not against any process that puts peace back on the table. So I think we'd welcome it. We'd support it in every way we can. We want it to be useful. We want it to be, demonstrate what we're able to do. Again, we respect the Palestinian Authority's positions. We respect their decisions. But if they want to press ahead, then I think we would only support them all the way.
So I would just quote what my foreign minister said, Mr. Ashkenazi, on this. The Abraham Accords did not come on the expense of the Palestinians. Rather, they are an opportunity that they should take as quickly as possible. And I would say that Israel's very strong and solid position on this is that there is no substitute for direct bilateral without preconditions negotiations. We will be more than happy if the Palestinians will enter them immediately.
Let's talk a little about economy. There is a consensus that about the huge potential of the economic science, business cooperation between Israel and the UAE based on the unbelievable trade skills of the UAE, the brilliance there, the access, and whatever we know about Israel. I would be very much happy to hear what you both think about it, and specifically about infrastructure. I met a lot of businessmen in the UAE that want to invest and even buy Israeli infrastructure. By the way, one of them wants to buy the seaport of Haifa. And I want just to tell you, Ambassador Ghobash, that Alon was born in Haifa. And Israel generally is nervous, for example, when the Chinese bought a huge food company and communication company. There was nervousness within Israeli decision makers. What's the approach when we're negotiating with our friends in the UAE, Alon? Do we feel very comfortable with it? And generally about the potential of the economic cooperation and trade with the UAE. Ambassador Ghobash, be first, please.
Oh, okay. I'm very excited myself about the commercial aspects and the economic aspects of the agreement. And as you know, there are so many Israelis right now in the Emirates speaking to many different businessmen. There is a similarity, I think, between Israeli society and the Emirate society. We're extremely entrepreneurial. People like me are looked down upon in a sense for having joined government. There is a tremendous entrepreneurial spirit in the Emirates, and that's been demonstrated over the last 30 years. In particular, over the last 30 years, with the huge growth of the Emirati economy. I think Israel shouldn't be particularly worried about our desire to invest in key infrastructure like the Port of Haifa. Our interest is really commercial. It is not in any way kind of politically motivated. And that's something that, as ambassador in Russia, I explained to the Russians. And it's the same kind of position that we've taken traditionally on our investments in the United States, where there were similar arguments about potentially, sort of security issues or politicized investments. Our focus is on maintaining our economic interests and maintaining our income. And diversifying our economy away from the natural resources, petroleum. So I think you should look at it from that angle, rather than thinking that we might have some kind of political agenda. We are, I suppose, hard-nosed businessmen who are interested in maintaining return on our investments. And I can't think of a single kind of occasion where we make an investment at a loss in order to attain some kind of political advantage. It's just not the way we approach the world.
Well, I don't think one has the luxury of underestimating the importance of the economy and technology here as one of the most important engines of this whole thing. These are the instructions coming from the Prime Minister, from the Foreign Minister, from the government of Israel. And I also have to say that in my last visit to Abu Dhabi, it was crystal clear in the conversations that we had with the leadership of the UAE, that from their point of view, there is no daylight between the instructions I have from my political leadership and the instructions that they give. This is really front and center, and one cannot and should not ignore it. As we speak, there are almost 400 Israeli businessmen participating in a technological exhibition in Dubai, which is called GITEX. It's not only Israeli technology companies, it's banks, it's other trading houses. This is a massive operation of Israeli, mainly private sector, but not only private sector, also governmental companies that are looking at the Emirates and also at Bahrain as a new, very important partners. You're right about the participation of an Emirati company in the privatization process of the Port of Haifa. Look, obviously, as you said, I come from Haifa, but I don't have any relation to the port itself, unfortunately. But I would say, without referring to this or that specific bid, that Emirati involvement in the Israeli market, and you have different angles of this, including the technological aspects, the high-tech sector, I think is very much welcomed. I myself, in the last couple of months, had numerous meetings with Emirati businessmen that came to visit us, and I think this thing should be cultivated very much, because if we will be able to do deliverables, to do business, to do tourism and people to people, I think the rest of it will be much easier to achieve.
We're getting close to the end of the hour. In fact, we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left. Ben, can I give the final question to you before we wrap up?
This would be a weird one. The biggest buzz in Israel right now is an Emirati sheikh, Ambassador Ghobash, named Hamad Ben Khalifa Al Nahyan, that just bought 50% of the football, Beitar Jerusalem football team, which is the Likud right-wing Jerusalem football symbol of Israel. And Alon and myself want to ask you if you have an investor to buy our teams as well, Maccabi Haifa and Hapoel Tel Aviv. Do you know anything about this this weird story?
I don't. I have two kind of responses. Number one, I'm happy to buy all of your teams if you take a check. And number two, I find it interesting because traditionally I believe that team was slightly anti-Arab. So it seems that not only is anti-Semitism disappearing, but anti-Arabism is disappearing too. So we should celebrate it.
That's exactly the story. They were traditionally anti-Arabs, and suddenly the owner is an Arab billionaire from the Emirates. And for me, this is the symbol of the whole story.
Yeah,
in one story, one small story. Alon, do you have a comment about Beitar Jerusalem?
I want to give on record very friendly advice to Omar. Omar, do me a favor, do not buy Ben's team. These people never score. They will give you only grief. Come to Haifa and we'll do business.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the advice.
Okay.
We are at the end of our hour. This was a fantastic conversation. I really feel we're just getting started. I'd like to thank our guests, Assistant UAE Minister for Culture and Public Diplomacy, Omar Ghobash, Ambassador Alon Ushpiz, the Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry. Fantastic conversation. Thank my colleagues, Ben Caspit, my Monitor colleagues here, Phil Calabro, Ali Audi, Cooper Close, and Tyler Hoffman for helping make this happen. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to our Monitor newsletter and podcast. Both Ben and I have regular podcasts. Alon's been a recent guest. We're going to get Ambassador Ghobash as well as a guest the coming weeks. And continue to follow us at Monitor. And again, thank you all. Really appreciated the conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.